Hello, my name is Javier Ruiz, and I'm back here with you to look at a second case study on digital trade and software accountability. Now, what do we mean by why is this relevant? What is the context? I mean, the thing is that we know that nowadays software is everywhere. We all know, particularly the word algorithm, we hear it everywhere. We all remember, or most of us will remember, the big scandal a few years ago, 2 years ago now, when the A-levels and GCSEs pretty much had to be cancelled when during COVID, and then there was a computer system that was meant to allocate particular grades to students on the basis of their previous work. And that computer system was an algorithm that was a series of a logic for how students were going to be allocated their new grades. And it was a complete failure. It didn't work well. It brought down many of the grades, and in the end, the program had to be scrapped. A much more sadly sad case and high-profile case of software being embedded and having a huge impact on human lives was the series of crashes that the new model of Boeing 737 plane suffered. Again, a few years ago, when they found that actually the company was trying to avoid having to bring in some more expensive systems. So they made a software change. And there was actually a program that was taking over the pilots and steering the plane down rather than up and forcing it to crash, and that caused the lives of several hundred people. So now, as we see, basically software and algorithms and source code, which is like how programmers, instruct computers to take instructions, are everywhere. I mean, these are very high-profile cases, but every time we ask for a mortgage, or every time, in many cases, when we go online and we get our results from a search engine, or we get a feed from Facebook or other social media, we are encountering software and algorithms. So why? So what does digital trade say about software and algorithms? Well, digital trade agreements restrict access to software. There are clauses, and this is from the UK-Japan Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which says that the two countries shall not require access to software as a condition for the import, distribution, sale, or use of that software or products containing that software. The clause is a bit longer, but basically the idea is that when technology from Japan comes into the UK government should not be able to require in any form access to the software or the source code, or to be able to look into the algorithm. I mean, of course, there are some exemptions. We're trying to make this discussion simpler, but there is also a lot of the discussion among experts, and to one extent, like some of the exemptions may operate. So the question is that, trade agreements as a principle try to restrict what governments can do in terms of accessing this software. So why would they want that? Well, the main reason why trade agreements modern digital trade agreements include these clauses is to stop a phenomenon called forced technology transfer, which is quite prevalent, or allegedly, in China. And this means that, for example, a government, like say the Chinese government, if a company wants to set up a factory there, they may say, oh, we welcome your investment. We welcome you to set up a factory here. We welcome you to sell a software or something here, but we want you to share your technology in exchange. And this could be done in a very open way, or it could happen through regulation, for example, to say, oh, we need to inspect your technology for safety, and what happens is that after the technology has been inspected for safety, then a year later, a Chinese company has a carbon copy of the technology that had been inspected. So mainly US companies, but also some other companies have been expressing a lot of concern about this phenomenon of forced technology transfer taking place in China, to a lower extent in other countries like Vietnam, but not in many other contexts. I think that the power balance is not so strong in favor of the local government that they can impose this kind of demands on US companies or British or other or European companies that have got technology that they will want to acquire. But also there are some, there will be some situations, where we may want to actually look at the technology, and this is the counter argument for why we may need, access. And the main problem is that, as we said before, like with the example of the Boeing, crashes, we do need to be able to look into technology. In the UK, for example, the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum, which is a new entity created by all of the main regulators, like the Competition and Markets Authority, Ofcom, the Telecoms Regulation, the Information Commissioner that deals with privacy, and the Financial Conduct Authority. They are very concerned. They're really interested in making sure that they can look into software, they can look into algorithms, which, as we said before, is the kind of the fundamental logic, that drives the decisions, that the computers will take. And this is important, as we said, for mortgages, for credit scores, for many situations where individuals will be affected. So that is, if we cannot look at software because the trade agreement says that, this cannot happen, and a company, foreign company that could use those trade agreements to push back against UK government requests, or a regulator or public body requests for access to the software. So this, so here we find, like the, in a very, very simplified way, like the crux of the argument here. So the trade-off that we need to look at is whether the protection of UK companies, when they as exporters of technology, from being stolen, outweigh the potential cost of not being able to investigate this technology, other technology, when it comes in. So now the idea, of course, is that protecting UK companies should protect, UK jobs, should protect also UK consumers, because they will find that their technology, they can enjoy better technology, and the role of the UK as an innovative country will be protected, And then, of course, if companies have their technology protected, that means that they will be more encouraged to invest in higher tech rather than just saying, well, why do we bother to, create anything sophisticated if it's going to be stolen anyway? And now, of course, the cost of not being able to investigate, risks from technology, as we said before, are also quite high. I mean, that it's the question here as well is that it's a bit difficult to see how, for a person in the UK who is encountering, for example, an automatic car that crashes and comes from a country that has a trade agreement, and there are problems, even if it's not 100% impossible, there are problems to look at the technology, maybe after a crash, but then, or maybe not before a crash, So, and at that point, how do we match, that with the benefit of a separate company, separate workers, that have their jobs protected, because when they export their company to China or other countries, that is, their jobs are protected. So it's we understand that it's a little bit difficult to see those trade-offs, but I think if we try to take a kind of like really top level view, we can see that, there are some benefits, but there are also some risks. And the other question that we need to see is also to what point UK companies are in the position of the exporters, that are, or the importers, because at the moment that is also something that we will need to consider, to what point the UK companies can actually benefit from accessing more technology, but of course doing it in a fair manner. Well, thank you, and hopefully, that it will lead to an interesting discussion.